Well, if we're on that topic, we might as well go ahead and get into the next topic, which is we have some new research on exactly how the Nazis targeted transgender people, and I feel like this is something we can definitely use to make sure that, I don't know, certain tragedies don't repeat themselves. But let's go ahead and take a look at this article and see what the hell is going on. Also, Cinder, thank you for redeeming your points for an Ara. You fucking degen. And a Nubian, thank you for the hydrate. I will take care of that real quick. It says here, in the fall of 2022, a German court heard an unusual case. It was a civil lawsuit that grew out of a feud on Twitter about whether transgender people were victims of the Holocaust. Though there is no longer much debate over whether gay men and lesbians were persecuted by the Nazis, there's very little scholarship on trans people during this period. The court took expert statements from historians before issuing an opinion that essentially acknowledges that trans people were victimized by the Nazi regime. This is an important case. It was the first time a court acknowledged the possibility that trans people were persecuted in Nazi Germany. It was followed a few months later by the Bundestag, Germany's parliament, formally releasing a statement recognizing trans and cisgender queer people as victims of fascism. Also, Ravi, thank you very much for the resubscription. Hello. Said up until the past few years, there had been very little research on trans people under the Nazi regime. Historians like myself are now uncovering more causes like that of more cases like that of Tony Simon. So, said Robbie has arrived and Blizzy don't work. I need to get him working real quick. Let's Blizzy, can I get you working?
Boop.
All right, he should work now, probably, maybe. So that's what I fear about this is the Trumpers and the AFD are repeating the past and they know what the Nazis did. Well, this is one of the reasons why we need to look at the past. It's important to understand why this stuff happened in the past so that we do not make those mistakes again. I know that people have heard, like, ever since they were little children, that it's very, very important to understand the mistakes of the past so that you don't repeat them. It's a very, very common refrain that I'm sure a lot of people are maybe even a little tired of hearing, but let's be honest, it's an important thing to take into consideration because it's by understanding how this happened elsewhere that we can understand how it can happen here. In 1933, the year that Adolf Hitler took power, the police in Essen, Germany, revoked Simon's permit to dress as a woman in public. Simon, who was in her mid-40s, had been living as a woman for many years. The Weimar Republic, the more tolerant democratic government that existed before Hitler, recognized the rights of trans people, though in a begrudging, limited way. Under the Republic, police granted trans people permits like the one Simon had. In the 1930s, transgender people were called transvestites, which is rarely a preferred way to refer to trans people today. Yeah, like that term today almost always just is a synonym for crossdresser and is usually, but not always, used in a very disparaging way. At the time, it approximated what is now meant by transgender. The police permits were called transvestite certificates, and they exempted a person from the laws against cross-dressing. Why did you even have laws against cross-dressing in the first place? I don't know. I feel like in a world where we value freedom, maybe it's okay for women to wear pants, and it's okay for men to walk out in a blouse. Under the Republic, trans people could also change their names legally, though they had to pick from a short, pre-approved list. In Berlin, transgender people published several magazines and had a political club. Some glamorous trans women worked at the internationally famous El Dorado Cabaret. The sexologist Magnus Hirschfeld, who ran Berlin's Institute for Sexual Science, advocated for the rights of transgender people. The rise of Nazi Germany destroyed this relatively open environment. The Nazis shut down the magazines, the El Dorado, and Hirschfeld's Institute. Most people who held transvestite certificates, as Simon did, had them revoked or watched helplessly as police refused to honor them. And this was just the beginning of the trouble. So, I think we need to pause for just a second. To recognize that we've actually seen a little bit of this, a very, very small bit of this, talked about by conservative pundits here in the States already. If women start wearing pants and what's next, they'll think they don't need husbands. But we've seen some conservative pundits talk about whether it's okay, whether it's all right for people to dress in ways that people do not consider to be normal. Also, thank you for the 100 bits Brellatrix. We've seen that already here in the States. Not a ton by anybody that needs to be taken seriously, but like, if you asked a Michael Knowles or a Matt Walsh, should there be the ability, right, for people to go out and dress the way that they want, and you specifically talk about a guy going out in a blouse or a dress, then they'll probably say no. They'll probably, if you scratch hard enough, find some way to say that that's bad or wrong. But let's go ahead and continue here. Draconian measures were taken against trans people. In Nazi Germany, transgender people were not used as a political wedge issue in the way they are today. Boy howdy! Boy howdy! We keep having to go back to this little document here. We keep having to go back to this little document right here. Russia's attempt to generally poison political narrative in the West by fomenting political extremism on wedge issues and astroturfing of Western public opinion, generally discrediting the West. Wow. We keep having to come back to that. We keep having to come back to that shit. That's great. Isn't it? Isn't it? In Nazi Germany, they were not used as political wedge issues as they are today. There was little public discussion of trans people. What the Nazis did say about them, however, was chilling. The author of a 1938 book on the problem of transvestitism wrote that before Hitler was in power, there was not much that could be done about transgender people, but that now, in Nazi Germany, they could be put in concentration camps or subject to forced castration. And that was good, he believed, because the asocial mindset of transgender people and their supposedly frequent criminal activity justified draconian measures by the state. Where have we heard that before? Where have we heard that? Because I'm fairly certain we've heard, oh, I don't know, Mr. Michael Knowles talk about the importance of eliminating, quote, transgenderism from anything public. That's not too different from this shit. Simon was a brave person. I first came across her police file when I was researching trans people at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. The Essen police knew Simon as the sassy proprietor of an underground club where LGBTQ people gathered in the mid-1930s. She was hauled into court for criticizing the Nazi regime. By then, the Gestapo had had enough of her. Simon was a danger to youth, a Gestapo officer wrote. Sending her to a concentration camp was, quote, absolutely necessary. A danger to youth. Trans people being considered a danger to youth. Again, I wonder where we've heard that before. Oh, wait! That's the entire thesis that Chris Rufo has been trying to operate under when he's been saying that trans people are groomers. That's very, very normal behavior for him. Especially when you consider where that playbook seems to be from. Gee, I wonder, is Chris Rufo and is Michael Knowles a Nazi? Probably. Said other trans women did not escape. Hold on, I'm not certain of what happened to Simon. Her file ends abruptly, with the Gestapo planning her arrest, but there are no actual arrest papers. Hopefully, she evaded the police. Other trans women, however, did not escape. At the Hamburg State Archive, I read about H. Bode, who often went out in public dressed as a woman and dated men. Under the Weimar Republic, she held a transvestite certificate. Nazi police went after her for cross-dressing and having sex with men. They considered her male, and so her relationships were considered homosexual and therefore illegal. They sent her to the concentration camp Buchenwald, where she was murdered. Jesus Christ. I wonder how much of this stuff Yarakoro already knows about. I need to get in contact with them about this shit to see, like, if there's any more information on this that I'm not seeing that could be helpful here. Liddy Backroff of Hamburg also had a transvestite past under the Republic. She made her living selling sex to male clients. After 1933, the police went after her. They wrote that she was fundamentally a transvestite and a morals criminal of the worst sort. She too was sent to a camp and then murdered. Jesus fucking Christ. And this is the type of shit these people want in the United States? This is the type of stuff that people want to happen here? Why? What the fuck do trans people do to you merely by existing that gets people so worked up that they're willing to literally go on goddamn crusades in order to get rid of them? Like, why? Why is any of that considered okay? Why is any of that considered something that you would want? Why do people look at what Weimar Germany was doing before and then what the Nazis did afterwards and go, yeah, that's what I want for America? That's what I need. That's what I need in my states right now. I don't understand that. So they don't see trans people as, you know, people. So they don't see it as murder. People like this are monsters. So the scariest thing about this, though, isn't that they're monsters. The scariest part about this, by and large, is that these are people. There is not that much difference between you and I and somebody who ended up becoming a Nazi. Not really. Think about it. How many things do you think are required to happen for you to fall down that slippery slope? When I was younger, I want to say maybe 10, 11, 12 years ago, I was a fucking conspiracy theorist that thought that Alex Jones was right and the Twin Towers had fallen down because of internal explosives and thermite shit. I was a loose change theory piece of shit. Like, I think about the very little bit of push it took to get me to that position from just basic Christian conservatism and how much effort it took to get away from it. It's not hard for your average run-of-the-mill conservative to find themselves being this kind of bigot. It's not really that different or hard. Which sucks. Under the Reich conditions, like, a lot of people want to say that they would never do this, or there's no world in which they would fall for the same things that several people in Nazi Germany fell for. There's no way that this could happen here or this could happen to them. But those people are honestly deluding themselves. For people who think that, for people who truly and honestly think that they would be uniquely immune to the kinds of propaganda and the kinds of things that lead people down these roads, these dark, dark paths, those are the exact people who are most likely to be susceptible. Those are the exact people who are the easiest to target. Because those people, by and large, are the ones that are not going to be vigilantly looking out for the various things somebody might try to do to harm them, to change their frame of mind to one that is incredibly harmful. They're not going to be looking out for that kind of stuff, because looking out for that kind of stuff would be basically admitting that they are susceptible to it. Why should you look out for somebody trying to twist your mind into something that it's not? So a lot of it was fear. As far as the Nazi goes, he and his party preached fear and frightened the populace. The party manipulated the media to instill fear and tell stories of wrongdoings committed by those the party didn't like. But the thing is, it's not just that. The scariest thing about it, Onyx, to me, the scariest thing about it is not that a person... Yeah, Shadow Wolf, no, we're not doing that right now. That's getting refunded. That's getting refunded. The scariest thing about this right now, to me, over and above everything, is that what we would consider normal people could have their minds changed this way. Not that they were just good, wholesome people and they were afraid of what Hitler would do or say, and therefore they went along with the party. I'm worried about the people who are, like, otherwise perfectly normal people just baking apple pie, who end up just doing this shit, who end up going along with this shit, because it's not too far adjacent from what they already believe. Take somebody who is very, very hyper-vigilantly Christian, and they want to make sure that the devil is not influencing anything that them or their children do. How hard is it for a preacher just to talk to that person and go, well, you know, the transes are actually of the devil, and that means that they need to be going to hell like the rest of the sinners? It's not a very hard thing to convince them of. I went through the second part of the Satanic Panic where Pokemon and Harry Potter and all of that shit was what was being targeted after the initial one about, you know, D&D and Magic the Gathering. I went through that. I saw how easy it was for parents who otherwise were perfectly fine with their kids doing things like playing Yu-Gi-Oh! All it took was a single word from their pastors and suddenly, actually it's demonic, gotta throw all my kids' shit away. Like, the scariest part about this is not that, the supervillain got in the middle of the parliament and he changed everybody's minds. No, that's fucking stupid. The scary part isn't the supervillain. The scary part is the people who enabled it, the people who did not fight against it, not because they were scared, but because they agreed. I live in fucking Georgia. I've seen plenty of the people who would be perfectly on board with these types of policies. But it says, trans Germans who were previously misgendered. For a long time, the public didn't know the stories of trans people in Nazi Germany. Earlier histories tend to misgender trans women, labeling them as men. This is odd, given that when you read the records of their police interrogations, they're often remarkably clear about their gender identity, even though they were not helping their cases at all by doing so. Barkov, for example, told the police, "My sense of my sex is fully and completely that of a woman." There was also confusion caused by a few cases that, by chance, came to light first. In these cases, police acted less violently. For example, there is a well-known case from Berlin where police renewed a trans man's transvestite certificate after he spent some months in a concentration camp. Historians initially took this case to be representative. Now we have a lot more cases, and we can see that it's only an outlier. Police normally revoked those certificates. So a through line to today. Today, the right wing attacks trans people in the United States, and those are intensifying. Though the American Academy of Pediatrics and every other medical association approved of gender-affirming health care for trans kids, Republican politicians have banned it in 22 states, with even more trying to prohibit it. Gender-affirming medicine is now over 100 years old, and it has its roots in Weimar Germany. It had never been legally restricted in the United States, yet Missouri has essentially banned it now for adults, and other states are trying to restrict adult care. A host of other anti-trans bills are moving through the state legislatures. I find it fitting, then, that a transparent musical premiered this spring in Los Angeles. In the show, fabulously dressed trans Berliners sing and dance in defiance of Nazi thugs. It's a reminder that attacks on trans people are nothing new, and that many of them are straight out of the Nazi playbook. There is probably, for just about, said I misses the role that transgender people played in the Stonewall riots too. Yep. There are LGBTQ people, or there's plenty of people who are like gay and lesbian who I've seen try to be pick-me's online, arguing that what trans people did in the Stonewall riots didn't matter. So we're talking about the swing kids now? No. So I hadn't realized until now that I sometimes have to travel to the U.S. for business reasons, and I was starting to consider HRT. Is that going to become a problem? So there's ways around it. For instance, you can use Plume in order to get a prescription for HRT, even if you are in a location that you cannot get HRT normally. And then you can use things like the Amazon the Amazon pharmacy in order to have that HRT delivered directly to you. That way, you're not having to worry about getting it at a particular place, at a particular pharmacy. So, you can use Amazon and you can use Plume, and that will largely take care of that if you're in the States. But I think it's very interesting to look at all of this information and just kind of internalize how backwards things could get and how quickly they can go that way. Again, remember, it's not the one guy being the supervillain that leads to this type of spiral for a country. It takes the people who were willing to let that happen in the first place. So, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below, though. Hit the like button if you haven't already. And as always, everybody, insert in the video tagline here. Before we close out the video, I want to go ahead and showcase some fan art. This one's from Caden. New Suris is too powerful from when I debuted the male model from Salem's Guy. The next one we have is from a Nubian Skibbity Suris, because of course we have that. And then, of course, this last one is from Lore, my first digital fan art, a drywall coin Suris. Of course. Thank you all for your fan art submissions, and with that, let's get into the credits. Hey, I just quickly want to give a thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who keep this show running. YouTube and Twitch are a pretty bumpy ride at the best of times, and the stability a Patreon provides me is worth more than I can say here. I'd also like to thank each and every one of my $20 and up patrons here, and they would be Red Joker, Britzkrieg, Cameron, Dren, Jemshin, Smiling DM, Poundini, Mabbity Babbity, Naomi, Isaac, Jordan, Ravi, Giuni, Kiratorian, Prisma, all of you, I'm not saying that part, and Starlight. And finally, thank you to everyone else that helps keep this channel alive. While you're here, why not check out another video? And thank you for watching.